The morning my company went bankrupt, I walked into a conference room expecting to lose everything. What I didn't expect was to find Adrian Cross sitting on the other side of the table. My billionaire rival. The man who had spent 5 years trying to beat me. He had bought my debt, my building, my contracts, every last piece of the company I had spent 9 years building. But then he did something that made no sense. He refused to fire me. He refused to lay off my employees. And instead of asking about profits, clients, or what the company was worth, he looked me straight in the eyes and demanded 18 months of financial records. That was when I realized something terrifying. Adrian Cross hadn't bought my bankrupt company because he wanted the business. He had come looking for something else. And whatever it was, someone inside my company had been trying very hard to hide it. 3 hours earlier, I had walked into Hart Hale convinced it would be the last morning the company belonged to me. I had spent 9 years building it. 9 years. I started with one borrowed desk in Brooklyn, 2 employees, and barely enough money to keep the lights on. Eventually, Hart Hale became one of New York's fastest-growing sustainable development firms. We designed hotels, office towers, luxury residential projects, public redevelopment projects. At our peak, nearly 200 people worked for me. Then everything collapsed. 2 major clients cancelled within weeks. A construction partner walked away from a multi-million-dollar project. Our lenders froze our credit. Investors stopped returning my calls. And after 3 months of trying to hold everything together, we no longer had enough cash to survive. That morning, I passed through the lobby of our Manhattan headquarters and tried not to look at my employees. Some pretended to work. Others whispered near the elevators. Everyone knew why the board was meeting upstairs. They just didn't know whether they would still have jobs when it ended. Neither did I. My attorney, Daniel Price, was waiting inside the conference room. Representatives from the bank sat beside him. 2 board members were there too. Nobody looked happy to see me. I put my folder on the table and sat down. Let's do it. Daniel frowned. Do what? Stop pretending there's another solution. I looked around the table. The bank rejected our restructuring proposal. We can't make next month's obligations. So let's liquidate whatever is left and make sure the employees get as much as possible. Daniel didn't answer immediately. Instead, he pushed a document toward me. Something changed last night. I looked at him. What? We received an offer. I froze. For Hart Hale. He nodded. For one stupid second, hope came rushing back. Maybe someone believed the company could survive. Maybe we had one final chance. Who? Daniel looked toward the conference room doors, and before he could answer, they opened. A man's voice came from behind me. Me. My stomach dropped. I knew that voice. I turned. Adrian Cross stood in the doorway. Tall, dark suit, perfectly calm. Exactly the way he always looked when everyone else in the room was losing control. Adrian Cross was the billionaire CEO of Cross Meridian Developments, and for 5 years, he had been my biggest rival. We had competed for contracts from New York to Miami. He beat me in Chicago. I took a Denver development away from him. He once outbid me by $4 million for a Manhattan redevelopment project. 6 months earlier, we'd nearly torn each other apart on stage during an industry conference. I had accused corporations like his of using billions in capital to squeeze independent firms out of the market. He had looked at me in front of hundreds of people and said, "Then build something strong enough that nobody can take it from you." Now he walked into the conference room of the company I had failed to save, and sat directly across from me. I stared at Daniel. No. Daniel looked down. I turned back to Adrian. What did you do? Adrian placed a leather folder on the table. I made an acquisition. What did you acquire? The outstanding debt. I felt my chest tighten. That's all.
No.
He opened the folder. The remaining shareholders accepted my offer this morning. Cross Meridian now controls Hart and Hale's assets, active contracts, intellectual property, and real estate. I stared at him. For a second, I genuinely couldn't understand what he was saying. Then I did. You bought my company. Yes. All of it. His eyes never left mine. All of it. A bitter laugh escaped me. Of course. Of all the people who could have bought Hart and Hale, it had to be him. You've got to be enjoying this. I'm not. Please. I leaned back. You've spent 5 years trying to beat me. Now you finally get to walk into my office after I've lost everything and tell me you own it. This isn't about winning. Of course it is. I stood. So congratulations. Lena. No, really. I gestured around the room. Take whatever you want. Sell the furniture. Strip the company for contracts. Shut down the offices. His jaw tightened. And when you're finished, I suppose you'll fire everyone.
No.
I stopped. What? There will be no immediate layoffs. I stared at him. Adrian continued. Payroll will be brought current by Friday. Health benefits continue. Existing projects remain active. I looked around the table. Even Daniel seemed surprised. You're keeping everyone. For now. Nothing about this made sense. Adrian Cross didn't become a billionaire by keeping failing companies alive out of kindness. So what's the catch? A 90-day transition.
Fine.
You'll oversee it. I stared at him. Excuse me. You remain CEO. I actually laughed. You buy my company and now you expect me to work for you. I expect you to keep running the company you built.
No.
Lena. You own the building. You own the contracts. You apparently own every desk in this place. I leaned toward him. But you don't own me. His expression barely changed. I know. Those 2 words stopped me. Not because of what he said, because of the way he said it. There was no smugness, no victory, almost as if keeping me here had nothing to do with controlling me. I reached for my folder. Then we are done. Not yet. Adrian slid several pages across the table. I glanced down and frowned. This wasn't a restructuring proposal. It wasn't an employee list. It wasn't a business plan. It was a request for records, bank statements, vendor payments,
Wire transfers.
contract amendments, internal approvals, accounts payable, 18 months of financial activity. I looked up. You just bought an entire company and this is what you're asking for? Yes. What about our clients? Later. Our projects? Later. Revenue projections? Later. My irritation returned. Then what exactly are you looking for? Adrian's face became serious. I want to know where your money went. I stared at him. We went bankrupt. That's where it went.
No.
He tapped the records request. 18 months ago, Hart and Hale had more than $30 million in signed work. We lost contracts. Not enough. My stomach tightened. What are you saying? He stood. I'm saying your company shouldn't be this broke. The room suddenly felt colder. I looked at the pages again. Have you been investigating me? Adrian buttoned his jacket. Get me those records. I stepped toward him. Adrian. He stopped. Why did you really buy my company? For the first time all morning, he hesitated. Then he looked directly at me. because by the time I figured out something was wrong, buying it was the only way I could get inside. He walked out. I didn't move. I just stared at the financial records sitting in front of me. For 3 months, I had blamed bad contracts, bad timing, and myself for Hart Hale's collapse. But Adrian Cross had just spent millions buying my bankrupt company. And instead of asking how much money it could make him, he wanted to know who had made the money disappear. And suddenly, losing my company wasn't the thing that scared me most. It was realizing that someone might have made sure I lost it. By 8:30 the next morning, Adrian Cross had already taken over the executive conference room, reassigned 2 officers, scheduled 4 meetings, and somehow managed to make a building with my name on the front feel like his. I hated him for that almost as much as I hated how quickly everyone adapted. Assistants carried files into the conference room. Cross Meridian's legal team occupied the East Wing. 2 of Adrian's senior executives had arrived before sunrise. And sitting outside my office was a printed transition schedule with his name above mine. Adrian Cross, Executive Oversight. Lena Hart, Chief Executive Officer. I stared at it long enough for my assistant, Rachel, to notice. You okay?
No.
She gave me a sympathetic look. At least we are still employed. That shut me up. Because she was right. Yesterday, nearly 200 people had believed they were about to lose their jobs. Today, they were working. And the only reason was the man currently standing in my conference room drinking coffee like he hadn't just purchased my life. I walked in. Adrian looked up from a financial report. You're late. I checked my watch. It's 8:58. The meeting started at 8:45. My meeting was scheduled for 9. I changed it. I put my folder on the table. Of course you did. He almost smiled. Almost. 5 years earlier, Adrian Cross had been nothing more than a name I kept seeing on contracts I wanted. Cross Meridian was already enormous by then. Hotels, commercial towers, public infrastructure, luxury residential projects. They had access to investors I could barely get meetings with. Then Hart Hale won a redevelopment contract in Denver that everyone expected Adrian to take. That was the first time we met. He approached me after the announcement, shook my hand, and said, "Congratulations." I had been young enough to believe he meant it. 3 months later, he beat me for a Boston waterfront project by less than 1%. After that, we kept colliding. Chicago, Miami, Philadelphia, New York. Whenever Hart Hale appeared on a shortlist, Cross Meridian seemed to appear beside us. And whenever Adrian walked into a room, he acted like the outcome had already been decided. He had inherited connections most people spent decades trying to build. He flew private, owned properties in 3 states, had a financial magazine cover that called him one of the most aggressive deal makers in America. And worst of all, he was good. Very good. I had spent years telling myself that men like Adrian succeeded because money gave them room to make mistakes. But deep down, I knew that wasn't the whole truth. He saw angles other people missed. Which was exactly why yesterday's questions bothered me. Adrian didn't do anything without a reason. Let's begin, he said. Around the table sat 6 members of Hart Hale's leadership team, including Victor Shaw, my CFO. Victor had been with me almost 7 years. He was 51, cautious, dependable, and usually the calmest person in any crisis. During the worst months of our collapse, he had been the person reminding me to sleep, to eat, to stop blaming myself for things I couldn't control. Adrian stood at the head of the table. Cross Meridian's immediate priority is stabilization. No expansion. No new markets. No major capital commitments. I frowned. One of his executives changed the slide. Effective immediately, discretionary spending above $25,000 requires Cross Meridian approval. That won't work, I said. Adrian looked at me. We are 6 seconds into the meeting. And you're already wrong. Rachel looked down at her notes. Victor shifted in his chair. Adrian folded his arms. Go ahead. Our project managers authorize emergency expenditures above that amount every week. Materials, consultants, site changes. If every decision has to go through your team, project stall. We need financial control. You need control. The company needs speed. His expression hardened. For someone whose company ran out of cash, you're unusually resistant to financial oversight. The room went very still. That one landed. I leaned back. And for someone who supposedly wants to save this company, you're unusually eager to make it impossible to operate. Adrian stared at me. I expected him to shut me down. Maybe remind everyone that he owned the place now. Instead, he looked at the slide. Then at his chief operating officer. Raise the threshold to $75,000 for active projects. Anything above that gets same-day review. His executive nodded. Done. I blinked. Adrian looked at me. Better. I hated how surprised I was. Yes. Good. Next. That was the first moment I began to understand something dangerous about Adrian Cross. He didn't need to win every argument. He just needed to get the right answer. And somehow, that made him harder to hate. The meeting continued. Staffing, client retention, insurance, construction schedules, legal exposure. Then Adrian closed the presentation. I need one more thing. Victor looked up. Adrian's attention settled on him. Mr. Shaw. Victor smiled politely. Adrian. I want the complete accounts payable history for the last 18 months. Victor nodded. That's already being prepared. Include vendor onboarding files. Of course. Original versions. Not exported summaries. Victor's expression changed slightly. So you want the contracts? I want everything. Adrian began counting them off. Vendor applications, tax forms, payment authorizations, bank instructions, change orders, archived contracts, deleted project folders. I looked at him. Deleted folders. Yes. Why would you need deleted files? He ignored me. And every wire transfer above $50,000. Victor took off his glasses. That is going to involve thousands of transactions. I know. Something about the way Adrian said it made me uneasy. Victor leaned back. If this is a standard financial audit, my department can prepare summaries that will save your team considerable time. I don't want summaries. Adrian's voice stayed calm. I want source documents. Victor's jaw tightened. For less than a second. But I saw it. Is there a specific transaction you're concerned about? I asked. Adrian looked at me. No. Then why are you treating my CFO like a suspect? I'm asking questions. You're asking very specific questions. Victor stepped in. Lena, it's fine. But Adrian wasn't looking at Victor anymore. He was looking at me. Did your bank ever question changes in vendor payment instructions? I frowned. No. Any unexplained duplicate invoices? Not that I know of. Projects showing higher costs than approved budgets. Every company has overruns. That's not what I asked. I felt irritation rising again. What exactly do you know? Adrian didn't answer. Instead, he picked up a folder and opened it. Last November, Hart Hale changed banking information for 3 subcontractors within 11 days. Victor spoke before I could. That happens. Adrian looked at him. All 3 accounts were opened within the same month. Silence. My eyes moved from Adrian to Victor. Victor gave a small shrug. We process hundreds of vendors. I don't memorize individual bank accounts. Adrian closed the folder.
No.
But someone in your department approved them. Victor's voice cooled. Are you accusing my team of something? Not yet. My stomach tightened. Not yet. There it was again. That feeling that Adrian wasn't discovering these things now. He had come into Hart Hale already knowing where to look. I waited until the meeting ended. Executives filed out one by one. Victor was almost at the door when Adrian said, "Mister." "Sure, please have those files sent to my office before 6. Victor stopped. "They'll be there." He left. I waited until the door shut behind him, then turned on Adrian. "You knew about those accounts before yesterday?" "Yes." My anger disappeared. "What?" "You heard me." "How?" Adrian gathered his papers. I stepped between him and the door.
No.
"You're going to answer me this time." His eyes dropped briefly to where I stood blocking him, then back to my face. "You've been inside this company for less than 24 hours, and somehow you know which vendors changed bank accounts months ago. You know which files were deleted. You knew we were losing money before you bore us." He said nothing. "You've been investigating Hart Hale." Still nothing. "How long?" His jaw tightened. "Move, Lena."
No.
A beat passed between us. Then Adrian set the folder back on the table. His voice was quieter when he spoke. "You trust Victor?" It wasn't a question. Of course I trust Victor. "He's been with you 7 years." "Yes." "He handled your financing during the expansion." "Yes." "He controlled vendor approvals during the last 18 months." I stared at him. "Where are you going with this?" Adrian stuttered me for a moment, then asked the one question I wasn't prepared for. "How well do you really know Victor?" By Friday morning, I had decided there were only 2 possibilities. Either Adrian Cross was playing a very complicated game with me, or I had been wrong about him for 5 years. I preferred the first possibility. It was easier, because hating Adrian made sense. Understanding him didn't. I was reviewing project schedules in my office when Rachel appeared in the doorway. "Have you checked your email?" I didn't look up. Which disaster am I looking for? Payroll. That got my attention. I opened the message, then read it twice. All outstanding employee salaries had been paid. Not partially. Not scheduled. Paid. Every overdue paycheck. Every missed reimbursement. Even delayed retirement contributions had been restored. I stared at the screen. When did this happen? This morning. Who approved it? Rachel gave me a look. I already knew the answer. Adrian. She nodded. For 3 weeks, I had been looking employees in the eye while asking them to wait for money they had already earned. Some had mortgages. Some had kids in college. One project manager had quietly taken a second job driving for a rideshare company at night because his paycheck was late. Now every dollar was there, and Adrian hadn't said a word to me about it. That bothered me more than if he'd announced it in front of the entire company. I stood. Where is he? Conference room. Of course he was. I found him on a video call with members of Cross Meridian's board. I was about to leave when I heard one of them say, "The Raleigh office needs to go." I stopped. Hart Hale's Raleigh office employed 46 people. Another voice came through the speaker. "The location hasn't been profitable in 14 months. Close it, move the active contracts to New York, and eliminate the overhead." Adrian sat at the end of the table, expression unreadable. A board member continued. You didn't acquire Hart and Hale to run a charity. Adrian leaned back.
No.
Then shut it down.
No.
Silence. Even through the laptop speakers, I could feel the reaction. The board member frowned. Excuse me. The Raleigh office stays open. For what reason? Because closing it during restructuring damages 3 active projects, eliminates local permitting relationships we've spent years building, and puts 46 employees on the street before we've even determined whether the office can be stabilized. The board member gave a dry laugh. Since when do you make acquisition decisions based on employee feelings? Adrian's face went cold. I don't. Then what is this? Good business. He leaned forward. If we close Raleigh now, we save $2 million in operating costs and potentially lose $9 million in contracted work. Nobody answered. Adrian continued. So unless someone has a better argument than it looks expensive on a spreadsheet, we are done discussing it. The call ended 5 minutes later. I waited outside. When Adrian walked into the hallway, he stopped when he saw me. How much did you hear? Enough. He started walking. I followed him. You paid the overdue salaries. Yes. You kept Raleigh open. Yes. And you weren't going to mention either one. He stopped. Was I supposed to? I stared at him. I don't know. Most men who spend millions saving people's jobs usually make sure someone notices. Adrian looked almost amused. You noticed. You know what I mean. He kept walking. I followed. What are you doing? Going to my office.
No.
With Hart and Hale. That made him stop again. I lowered my voice. If this is some attempt to convince me you're not the ruthless corporate monster everyone says you are, it's unnecessary. His eyes narrowed. You think I paid 200 employees to impress you. I think you rarely do anything without a reason. That part is true. So what's the reason? Payroll was owed. That's simple. Yes. And Raleigh. Closing it would have been stupid. You fought your own board over 46 jobs. I fought my board over a bad decision. Same result. Adrian sighed. Lena, I don't need you to like me. I don't. I know. And I definitely don't owe you gratitude. I didn't ask for it. That shut me up. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then Adrian glanced at the folder in my hands. North Harbor Project. I frowned. How do you know? Blue tab. That could mean anything. Not in your filing system. I stared at him. He continued walking. North Harbor ran 12% over budget because the steel supplier changed pricing after the second design revision. I stopped. How do you know that? He looked back. It was in the project file. You've read the entire file? Yes. That thing is 400 pages. 418. I stared at him. Then he added, Your project manager, Marcus Bell, flagged the supplier twice. Nobody followed up. I felt another chill. How do you know Marcus? I don't. You knew his name. I read. You also knew about those vendor accounts yesterday. Yes. You knew which projects were over budget. Yes. You knew about the Raleigh office before your own board brought it up. Yes. My patience snapped. How much do you know about my company? Adrian's gaze settled on me. More than I should. That wasn't comforting. He walked away before I could ask another question. For the rest of the afternoon, I couldn't focus. Everywhere I looked, Adrian seemed to know something before I did. which clients had delayed payments, which subcontractor had changed banking information, which projects had gone over budget, which archived files were missing. He hadn't walked into Hart Hale blind. He had walked in with a map, and I needed to know where he'd gotten it. So that evening, after most of the office entered, I locked my door and opened the vendor files Adrian had requested. I started with the 3 subcontractors whose banking information had changed. Nothing obvious. Then I checked the payment authorizations. Each transfer required 2 approvals. 1 from finance, 1 from the CEO. My approval. The first payment was for $86,000. My name appeared at the bottom. Lena Hart. I frowned. I didn't remember it. I pulled another. $112,000. Approved by Lena Hart. Another. $74,500. Same thing. Maybe I had forgotten. The final months before bankruptcy had been chaos. I had signed hundreds of documents. Then I noticed something. The signature on the first payment curved differently at the end. Mine always finished with a sharp upward stroke. This one didn't. I pulled an old contract from my drawer, placed them side by side. My heart began pounding. I checked the second authorization, then the third, then 7 more. Every one carried my name. Every one had supposedly been signed by me. And not one of the signatures was mine. I sat frozen at my desk. Someone had approved hundreds of thousands of dollars in payments using my authorization. Someone inside Hart Hale had been moving money and making it look like I was the one who signed it away. Someone had destroyed my company from the inside. I didn't go home that night. I couldn't. Not after finding my name on payments I had never approved. I locked my office door, ordered coffee I didn't drink, and started pulling every transaction connected to those vendors. By midnight, I had found 12. By 2 in the morning, 27. By 4, I stopped counting individual payments and started counting the money. $3.8 million. Gone. Not spent on materials. Not paid to legitimate contractors. Not lost because of bad projects. Gone through companies that, as far as I could tell, barely existed. I sat back from my computer and stared at the number. Nearly $4 million. And every payment had been authorized using my name. Suddenly, the last 18 months began looking different. Contracts we had blamed on bad luck. Projects we had lost by suspiciously narrow margins. Suppliers who had suddenly increased prices after we committed to bids. Clients who somehow knew exactly how low our competitors could go. I opened the file from a failed Philadelphia redevelopment proposal. Hart Hale had spent 6 months preparing that bid. We lost by less than 2%. At the time, Victor had told me our competitor simply came in more aggressively, but there was an email buried in an archived folder. An internal pricing sheet had been downloaded 48 hours before final bids were submitted. I checked access logs. Finance had accessed it. Then another file. Miami. Same pattern. Then Baltimore. Same thing again. My hands went cold. Someone hadn't just been stealing from Hart Hale. Someone had been feeding information out. They knew our prices, our margins, our borrowing limits, our weakest contracts. Every time we moved, someone outside the company already knew where we were going. By sunrise, I was staring at a spreadsheet that made my bankruptcy look less like failure and more like murder. Financial murder. Slow. Calculated. Designed to look natural. Then I found the name that changed everything. Marlowe Strategic Services. One of the vendors that had received more than $600,000 from Hart Hale. I searched old corporate records. Marlowe had almost no public footprint, but 3 years earlier, it had provided consulting services to a cross-Meridian subsidiary. I stopped breathing. Cross-Meridian. Adrian's company. I checked again. Then again. Same address. Same registration number. Same company. My exhaustion disappeared. Everything inside me hardened. Of course, Adrian knew which accounts to examine because he had already seen them. He knew where the money had gone because maybe he had helped send it there. He hadn't arrived to rescue Hart and Hale. He had arrived to collect what was left after helping destroy it. 20 minutes later, I was inside Cross Meridian's temporary executive suite on our 24th floor. I didn't knock. Adrian looked up from his laptop as I walked into his office. "You look terrible." I dropped a stack of papers onto his desk. "You destroyed my company." His expression changed immediately. "Close the door."
No.
"Lena." I said no. I pointed at the documents. $3.8 million. Fake approvals. Shell vendors. Confidential bids leaving my company before submission. Adrian stood, and one of those vendors worked with Cross Meridian. He looked down at the page. Marlowe. The fact that he recognized the name made something in me snap. "You knew." "Yes." I laughed once. There was nothing amused about it. Unbelievable. "Listen to me." "No, you listen." I stepped closer. "You spent years competing against me. You knew my contracts. You knew my debt. You knew exactly when I was weak enough to buy." "That's not what happened." "Then tell me what happened." Adrian's jaw tightened. "I can't." I stared at him. "You can't." "Not yet." I almost laughed again. "That's convenient." "Lena." "You knew money was disappearing before I did." "Yes." "You knew our bids were being compromised." "I suspected it." "You knew Marlowe." "Yes." "And then, when Hart and Hale finally collapsed, you happened to be standing there with enough money to buy the whole thing." Adrian came around the desk. "If I had engineered your collapse, why would I be showing you where to look?" "Because you thought I'd never figure it out." His eyes hardened.
No.
"Because you wanted the evidence buried."
No.
"Because you needed control of the company before someone found out." "Stop." His voice cracked across the room. I did. Not because I was afraid. Because Adrian almost never raised his voice. He stepped closer. "If I wanted Hart and Hale dead, Lena, it would be dead." I stared at him. "You expect me to believe that?" "I expect you to use your brain." "Don't patronize me." "Then stop treating the first ugly answer you find like it's automatically the truth." My anger flared. "You don't get to say that when you're hiding half the truth from me." His expression shifted. That landed. I lowered my voice. "How long?" He said nothing. "How long have you been investigating my company?" "Long enough." That isn't an answer.
No.
I moved closer. 3 months. Silence. 4. Nothing. 6. Something flickered in his face. There. I saw it. My stomach dropped. "You knew 6 months ago." Adrian looked away. My voice became quieter. 6 months ago, Hart and Hale wasn't bankrupt.
No.
We were struggling, but we were still solvent. Yes. So why were you investigating us? He didn't answer. I felt something inside me break. Was it Victor? Adrian looked back at me. What? You keep asking about him. I ask about a lot of people. You asked how well I knew him. Because you trust him. He's been with me 7 years. I know. He stayed when investors walked away. I know. He helped me keep this place alive. Adrian's face changed. Not anger. Something closer to pity. And I hated it instantly. Don't. Lena. Don't look at me like that. He exhaled slowly. Someone inside your company has been lying to you. My throat tightened. You mean Victor. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. Adrian glanced toward the door, then lowered his voice. There are things happening here that started long before you missed payroll. Until I know who's involved, I am not giving you names. You expect me to just trust you?
No.
That answer stopped me. He stepped back. I expect you to question everyone. Including you. Especially me. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then I gathered the papers from his desk. As I turned to leave, Adrian said, Lena. I stopped. Don't confront Victor. I looked over my shoulder. Why? Because if I'm right, the moment whoever did this realizes you know, they'll start destroying evidence. I held his gaze. You're asking me to protect your investigation.
No.
His voice was quiet. I'm asking you to protect yourself. I left without answering. But instead of going to my office, I went downstairs to records. If Adrian wouldn't tell me when his investigation began, I would find out myself. Cross Meridian's legal requests had been logged into Hart and Hale's archive system. I searched Adrian's name. Nothing. Then Cross Meridian. Nothing. Then I searched outside counsel associated with his company. One result appeared. A confidential records request, dated 6 months earlier. I opened it. Financial irregularities. Vendor relationships. Contract leakage. Internal authorization controls. My heartbeat slowed. Adrian hadn't begun looking into Hart and Hale after we went bankrupt. He had been looking 6 months before payroll failed, before our lenders pulled out, before I knew anyone was stealing from me. I stared at the date, and one terrifying thought settled over me. Adrian hadn't stumbled onto the destruction of my company. He had seen it coming, and somehow, he had known before I did. I stared at the anonymous message until the words stopped looking like words. Ask Adrian Cross why he planned to acquire your company before it ever went bankrupt. My first instinct was anger. My second was worse. Fear. Because the message fit too neatly with everything I already knew. Adrian had been investigating Hart and Hale 6 months before we ran out of money. He knew about suspicious vendors before I did. He knew which files were missing. He knew which transactions to question. And now someone was telling me that his interest hadn't started with an investigation. It had started with an acquisition plan. I didn't call him. I didn't text. I took the elevator upstairs. Adrian was alone in the temporary executive suite, standing beside the windows with Manhattan glowing behind him. He looked over when I entered. One glance at my face and he set down his phone. What happened? I held up mine. You tell me. He read the message. Nothing changed in his expression. That was answer enough. My stomach dropped. You knew. He looked at me. About the message. About the acquisition. Silence. I stepped closer. How long, Adrian? He exhaled. Lena. Don't. My voice sharpened. No more half answers. No more telling me I wouldn't understand. Did you plan to acquire Hart and Hale before we went bankrupt? His jaw tightened. Yes. The word hit harder than I expected. I laughed once. Quietly. Wow. It isn't what you think. You know, you say that a lot. Because you keep deciding what happened before you have all the facts. You've had every opportunity to give me the facts. I couldn't. Couldn't. I moved closer. You bought my company. You dug through my finances. You questioned my CFO. You knew someone was draining money from us, and all this time you were already planning to take control. I was monitoring Hart and Hale because something was wrong. And preparing to buy it. Yes. Why? He didn't answer. There it was again. That wall. I shook my head. This is unbelievable. Lena.
No.
You don't get to stand there acting like I'm irrational because I don't trust a man who refuses to tell me the truth. You don't distrust me because of what I haven't told you. I froze. His voice became quieter. You distrusted me long before I walked into that bankruptcy meeting. Maybe because you've spent 5 years giving me reasons. Have I? I stared at him. He stepped away from the window. I competed with you. You tried to crush me. I bid against you. You took clients. So did you. You humiliated me in front of an entire industry. His expression hardened. You mean the panel where you accused me of destroying independent businesses before 400 people? You deserved it. Based on what? Your reputation. He gave a humorless laugh. My reputation. Yes. You decided who I was before you ever bothered to know me. I crossed my arms. I know exactly who you are.
No, Lena.
You know the version of me that makes it easier for you to hate me. That landed. I hated that it did. He continued. Arrogant. Ruthless. Privileged. Obsessed with winning. Are you denying any of those? I'm saying you've spent 5 years turning me into the villain of every story because then you never have to consider the possibility that sometimes I was simply better prepared. My face burned. You really are unbelievable. And you're impossible. Then why keep me here? The question came out before I could stop it. Silence. Adrian looked at me. I felt my heartbeat change. I pushed harder. You could have replaced me the morning you bought Hart and Hale. He said nothing. You could have installed one of your executives and had me escorted out. Still nothing. But you didn't. I stepped closer. Why? His eyes moved over my face. Don't ask me that right now. Why? Because you're angry. I am. And you're looking for another reason to hate me. Maybe I already have one. Something broke in his expression. Not control exactly. Something underneath it. Do you think this has been easy for me? I stared at him. What? Having you in the same building every day. My breath caught. Adrian.
No.
He stepped toward me now. You wanted the truth. His voice was low. So here it is. The space between us disappeared. I notice when you walk into a room. I couldn't move. I know when you're about to argue with me because you tilt your chin before you do it. My pulse hammered. I know you pretend you're not scared whenever you twist that ring on your finger. My hand instinctively stopped moving. His eyes dropped to it. Then back to mine. I know you hate asking for help. I know you haven't slept properly in months. And I know I should have stopped noticing any of that the second Cross Meridian acquired your company. The anger inside me became something far more dangerous. I whispered, but you didn't.
No.
Why? His voice dropped. Because whatever this is stopped being professional a long time ago. Neither of us moved. I should have stepped back. I should have remembered the company, the employees, the rumors, the fact that this man had just admitted he had planned to acquire Hart and Hale before I even knew I was going to lose it. Instead, I said, "You're still hiding something from me." I know. I don't trust you. I know. You infuriate me. That almost smile appeared. I definitely know that. I hated the smile. I hated the way it changed his face. I hated that despite everything, I wanted to know what would happen if I stopped fighting him for 1 second. So I kissed him. Or maybe he kissed me. Even now, I'm not sure who moved first. 1 second we were arguing. The next, Adrian's hand was at my waist and my fingers were gripping the front of his shirt. It wasn't gentle. There was too much anger for gentle. 5 years of competition. Weeks of suspicion. Every argument. Every look we had pretended meant nothing. All of it seemed to collide at once. Then reality came rushing back. I pulled away. Adrian did too. We stood there breathing like we'd just done something far more dangerous than kiss. I looked toward the glass walls. Oh, God! No one saw. That isn't the point. I know. You own the company. Cross Meridian owns the company. Do not correct me right now. Fair. I stepped away from him. If anyone finds out. I already told you that you won't report directly to me. You said you were changing it Monday. I'll make it effective tonight. I looked at him. He reached for his phone. Rebecca Sloan takes full operational oversight immediately. Any decision involving your employment, compensation, performance review, or contract goes through her and the transition committee. Adrian. I should have done it sooner. His voice was steady again, but his eyes weren't. I will not put you in a position where anyone can say your job depends on what happens between us. That quieted me. For weeks, I had expected Adrian to use power whenever it benefited him. Instead, when power became dangerous between us, he was giving some of it up. And for the first time, I wondered whether the man I had spent 5 years fighting was not the man I had imagined at all. Maybe I had been wrong about him. Maybe not completely, but enough to scare me. I left his office without another word. The kiss followed me home. It followed me back to work the next morning. It followed me through every meeting where Adrian and I deliberately kept 3 feet of professional distance between us. And for the first time since he bought Hart Hale, I caught myself wondering what would happen when he finally told me everything. 3 nights later, I stayed late looking for the original contract files from our Boston redevelopment proposal. Adrian's legal team had moved several archived boxes into a conference room during the review. I searched one cabinet, then another. Nothing. I opened the bottom drawer of a locked lateral file someone had apparently forgotten to secure. Inside were Cross Meridian documents. Most had nothing to do with Hart Hale. Then I saw my name. Hart. I pulled out the folder. Confidential. Executive review only. I should have closed the drawer. Instead, I opened it. The first page was an acquisition analysis. Hart and Hale. Estimated valuation. Debt exposure. Ownership structure. Contingency strategies. My stomach tightened. Then I saw the date. 8 months earlier. 2 months before Adrian's investigation I already knew about. Long before Hart Hale became insolvent. Long before the missed payroll. Long before my lenders walked away. At the top of the next page were 5 words. Project Hart, acquisition authorized. I stopped breathing. Adrian hadn't simply seen my company's collapse coming. 8 months earlier, he had already been preparing to own it. After the night Adrian and I almost kissed, we did what 2 mature adults were supposed to do. We pretended it never happened. For exactly 3 days. The problem was, ignoring Adrian became considerably harder once I knew what he looked like at 2 in the morning with his tie loosened, his sleeves rolled up, and that carefully controlled billionaire expression finally gone. And apparently, I wasn't the only one having trouble forgetting. On Monday morning, I walked into our executive meeting carrying a large coffee. Adrian looked at it. That's your third. I stopped. My third what? Coffee. How would you know? You had one when you arrived. Rachel brought you another at 9:30. I stared at him. Are you monitoring my caffeine intake now?
No.
He looked back at his tablet. I'm monitoring whether my CEO is going to start vibrating before lunch. A laugh escaped me before I could stop it. Every executive at the table looked up. I immediately cleared my throat. Adrian's mouth twitched. That was another thing I had learned about him. When Adrian Cross was genuinely amused, he almost never laughed. The corner of his mouth moved first. When he was angry, his voice became quieter instead of louder. When he was worried, he loosened his tie. And when he hadn't slept, he rubbed the scar beneath his left thumb as if he didn't realize he was doing it. I had begun noticing far too much. And he noticed things about me too. That I hated sparkling water. That I always removed my heels under the conference table during meetings longer than an hour. That I skipped lunch when I was anxious. That I twisted the silver ring on my right hand whenever financial numbers frightened me. One afternoon, a sandwich appeared beside my laptop. I looked across the conference table. Did you order this? Adrian didn't look up.
No.
There's nobody else in here. Then perhaps Manhattan finally developed a sandwich delivery ghost. I opened the bag. Turkey.
No, master.
Exactly how I ordered it. You remembered. That made him look at me. Don't make it significant. I smiled. Wouldn't dream of it. For the first time in 5 years, our arguments had stopped feeling entirely like wars. Sometimes they were almost fun, which was dangerous, because the company had begun noticing too. I caught Rachel smiling once when Adrian leaned over my laptop to review a proposal. 2 project managers suddenly became fascinated by the floor when we walked out of an elevator together. And Victor, who had become strangely distant since Adrian started digging through the financial records, watched us with an expression I couldn't read. I reminded myself constantly that Adrian owned Hart Hale. Whatever existed between us could destroy my credibility faster than bankruptcy ever had. Then Nathan Cole walked back into my life. Nathan ran Cole Capital Partners, a private investment firm headquartered 6 blocks away. He was handsome, wealthy, charming, and very good at making an offer sound like he'd invented it specifically for you. Before the bankruptcy, Nathan had discussed investing in Hart Hale. The deal never happened. So when he showed up at our Manhattan office one Thursday afternoon, I was surprised. Lena. He kissed my cheek lightly. You look much better than the last time I saw you. That bad? You looked like you were considering throwing yourself out of a conference room window. I was on the 23rd floor. I would have reconsidered. He laughed. Then his expression softened. I'm glad you're still standing. Barely. Nathan glanced around the lobby. I hear Cross is restructuring. He is. I also heard he kept you. Something about the wording irritated me. He didn't keep me. I'm still CEO. Nathan raised his hands. Fair correction. Then he smiled. Have dinner with me. I blinked. Business. Mostly. That's suspicious. I've been looking at an investment opportunity that might interest you when all of this is finished. That got my attention. What kind of opportunity? Dinner first. Before I could answer, a familiar voice came from behind me. Cole. Nathan turned. Adrian was walking toward us. The temperature in the lobby seemed to drop 10 degrees. Cross. The 2 men shook hands. Neither smiled. Nathan glanced between us. Congratulations on the acquisition. Thank you. I was surprised. Were you? Nathan laughed lightly. I didn't realize Hart Hale interested you that much. Adrian's eyes briefly met mine. It does. Something about the way he said it made my pulse jump. Nathan looked at me. 7:30 tomorrow. I hesitated, then nodded. 7:30. Perfect. He left. I waited until the elevator doors closed, then looked at Adrian. He was staring at the elevator. What? Nothing. That face isn't nothing. What face? The one you use before destroying somebody during negotiations. Adrian turned toward me. Cole wants something. So does every investor in New York. He isn't an investor yet. Maybe that's why we are having dinner. His jaw tightened. There it was. I almost smiled. Are you jealous?
No.
That answer came very quickly. I don't care who you have dinner with. Wonderful. I began walking toward my office. Adrian followed. But you should know Cole has a reputation. I stopped. A reputation for what? Finding vulnerable companies and offering their owners less than they're worth. I stared at him. You bought mine while it was bankrupt. Exactly. I recognized the species. Despite myself, I laughed. Adrian did not. You think this is funny? I think you standing here warning me about ruthless billionaires is incredibly funny. Cole isn't. Adrian. I lowered my voice. You don't get to do this. His expression changed. Do what? Act like you have some claim over who takes me to dinner. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. He stepped closer, and suddenly the hallway felt much smaller. I don't like him. That sounds very much like your problem. He's interested in more than your company. And Adrian went still. I continued. You bought my company. You bought its debt. You bought this building. I held his gaze. But my personal life isn't another asset in the acquisition. Something flickered in his eyes. I know. The same two words he'd said during the bankruptcy meeting. But this time they sounded different. Almost painful. He stepped back. You're right. I hadn't expected that. What? You're right. He looked toward the glass offices surrounding us. You report to me. That makes this complicated in ways it shouldn't be. The flirtation vanished. His voice became purely professional. Starting Monday, operational oversight of Hart Hale will move to Rebecca Sloan, Cross Meridian's Chief Operating Officer. I frowned. Why? So your employment isn't directly controlled by me. I stared at him. Adrian. And any decisions concerning your compensation, position, or contract will go through the transition committee, not me. The meaning landed slowly. He wasn't creating distance because he didn't want me. He was creating distance because he did. And because he understood exactly what people would say if anything happened between us while he controlled my career. If everyone finds out. They won't hear it from me. That isn't what I'm worried about. I look through the glass wall toward my employees. They already think you saved my job. If anything happens between us, they'll wonder whether I earned this position at all. Adrian's expression softened. You built this company from a borrowed desk. My eyes returned to his. No one gets to rewrite 9 years of your work because of me. For once, I had nothing sarcastic to say. He walked away before I could find something. And that should have made everything easier. It didn't. Because now I knew the billionaire I'd spent years calling ruthless was willing to surrender control simply because he didn't want his power over me to become part of whatever was growing between us. That evening, I stayed late reviewing contracts. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. Then I saw the message. One sentence.
No introduction.
No name. Ask Adrian Cross why he planned to acquire your company before it ever went bankrupt. I read it twice, then a third time. My heartbeat began to pound. The warmth I'd felt toward Adrian vanished. Because 6 months earlier, he had already been investigating Hart Hale. And now someone was telling me that even before my company collapsed, Adrian Cross had already been planning to own it.